Soy oil contracts were up by about 1/3 cent in early morning trade, providing a boost to canola values. Strength in the Canadian dollar kept a lid on canola as it climbed over 75 US cents. The Chicago soy complex was stronger on Friday. This morning, the USDA reported a sale of 122,000 tons of soybeans purchased by unknown destinations. Weakness in energy markets and crude oil have kept pressure on the soy complex. Some offshore energy facilities had shut down due to Hurricane Zeta, but those facilities will begin repairs and reopening today. Weekly export sales estimates were between 1 and 2 million tons for soybeans, 100 and 450 million for soy meal, and 5 to 40,000 tons for soy oil. The January soybean contract is up 6 cents at $10.56 per bushel. December soy oil is up by about 1/3 cent at 33.3 US cents per pound. December soy meal is down 90 cents at $376 per hundredweight. Corn futures were slightly weaker on Friday morning. Weekly export sales estimates are between 700,000 and 1.5 million tons. South Korea purchased 65,000 tons of corn from the U.S. in an optional origin tender. The December contract is down 0.5 cent at $3.97 per bushel. Wheat futures were also lower this morning. Weekly export sales estimates are between 200 and 700,000 tons. The French wheat crop is reportedly around 65% planted. Winter wheat planting is 85% complete in the U.S. Russia is expected to get rain over the weekend, which may help their wheat crops. Argentina is also receiving some rain, though some say it's too late to turn the dry crop around. Chicago December is down 3.5 cents at $6. Kansas City December is down 0.5 cent at $5.41. And Minneapolis spring wheat is down 0.5 cent in the December contract at $5.52. That's a look at the ICE futures and the Chicago market for Friday morning, October 30th. For more news from the Markets Farm News team and expert analysis from Bruce Burnett and Mike Jubinville, go to marketsfarm.com. For Markets Farm in Winnipeg, I'm Marlo Glass.
This year's Value Bonanza sales event at Butler Farm Equipment Limited in Fort St. John gives you more ways to save. Choose 0% financing, cashback, and more on select New Holland tractors, hay and forage products, and materials handling equipment. These offers end December 31st, so make the trip to Butler Farm Equipment Limited in Fort St. John today. You get more choices and more savings when you buy during Value Bonanza. For commercial use only, customer participation subject to credit qualification and CNH Industrial Capital Canada Limited approval. Standard terms, conditions, and other restrictions apply. A down payment may be required.
The opinions expressed during this show do not represent those of this station. If you've missed any of this show, you can follow the podcast at Energeticcity.ca. Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Good morning. Welcome to the program. We will be joined by Dr. Jong Kim, the Chief Medical Officer of Health with Northern Health. In just a little while, we're going to be talking about flu season and how it might be different this year, given that we're in the COVID-19 pandemic. So that coming up in about 15 minutes time. But first, we're going to talk BC election once again, but this time, Fair Vote Canada called John Horgan and the BC NDP's majority a false majority. So we're going to talk to Gisela Ruckert of Fair Vote Canada about that. Hello, Gisela. Welcome to Moose Talks.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you very much. So again, the BC NDP won a huge majority, at least in the legislature, in terms of how many seats they're going to have. I think it's around 55 right now. That still may change based upon the mail-in ballots. But you guys sent out a release on Monday calling it a false majority. Can you explain why?
Right. So we call it a false majority because with about 45% of the popular vote, Horgan's NDP won a majority of seats without a majority of voter support. So it's a seat majority handed to him by the distortions of the voting system rather than an actual sign that more than half of the people voted for his party. So the majority of voters actually voted for other parties who now, turns out, have zero say in decision making.
Yes.
Last time I was just going to say that last time in 2017, the NDP got 40% of the popular vote and 41 of the 87 seats. And this time they went up to 45% of the vote and 55 of the 87 seats. So that means that a 5% increase in support gave them 34% more seats. And that's the funny math of first past the post.
Yes, and I should say,
Would you like to hear about...
I'm so sorry for interrupting you. I was just going to say, I should say,
No, that's okay.
you guys are a kind of pro-proportional representation advocacy group. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gisela.
No, I was just going to ask you if you wanted to hear what the results would have looked like under a proportional system.
Please let us know.
Okay, so the NDP voters would have elected the 40 MLAs they deserved in the province, not 55. And we, as you say, 55 may yet change, but this is using the numbers that have come in so far. Green voters would have elected 14 MLAs, not just 3, so quite a big difference for them. Liberal voters would have elected the 31 MLAs that they deserved, and Conservative voters would have elected probably the 2 MLAs that they deserve based on the current voting patterns. But it's also likely that they would have run more candidates and therefore had more votes. So a little hard to be exact about that.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me. I want to talk about the Green Party first here for a bit. I mean, they've been kind of, as I believe, pro-rep for quite some time now. And they, by my count, I mean, they would stand to gain the most here because they have 3 seats, the same amount they had the last election. But under pro-rep, they'd have far more say in kind of what happens in the legislature. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely, yeah, because as a general rule, first past the post favors larger parties and shortchanges the smaller parties. But really, it's the voters that are shortchanged the most because they don't get what they vote for right now. So in this election, 55% of British Columbians voted for parties who now have absolutely no power in government. And that's pretty normal for us. It's often even higher than that.
All right. I wanted to talk for a quick second about our riding specifically here in Peace River North. And again, still unofficial as there is mail-in ballots to count, but definitely looks like BC Liberal candidate Dan Davies won with something like 56% of the votes, while Conservative Party of BC leader Trevor Bolin finished second with 35%. So how would this look different on a riding level given proportional representation? Would Trevor have a seat in the legislature in a different way, just not because he won the riding in the way that Dan did?
I'm having trouble hearing you. You're breaking up for me. If you can't hear me, then maybe just stop me. But it's really hard to make apples to apples comparisons because under proportional representation, the riding...
Oh, it looks we got some lag issues here. I'm not sure if you could hear me, Gisela, but we're going to tell you a bit about Peace River North there. Still looks like it's frozen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take... Oh, we've got you back, Gisela.
Sorry, you started getting slower and slower, and then you disappeared completely. Anyways, yeah, so I did hear your question. So with respect to ridings, it's really hard to make apples to apples comparisons because the ridings would change under proportional representation. So either you'd have to have a lot more politicians, which surprisingly, I honestly haven't heard a lot of people clamoring for, or you have to make the riding boundaries somewhat larger. And there are several different options for doing that. But the other thing that we need to recognize is that voting patterns would change when votes for smaller parties actually matter just as much as votes for bigger parties. So having said that, the most obvious conclusion that I can draw when looking at the northern part of the province, say the 10 northernmost ridings in the province, is that according to the way that people voted this time under the old system, Liberal voters are overrepresented, NDP voters are underrepresented in your area, and the reasonably large chunk of Conservative voters up north are completely unrepresented. So under a proportional system, you would likely have a couple less Liberals in your region because all of them were elected with about 50% of the vote. And you'd have 1 or 2 more NDP MLAs who would be representing, you on the government side of the house. You'd have a little more representation there because so many of them were strong seconds in all those ridings. And all those Conservative voters would probably have at least 1 Conservative MLA to represent them. So the Conservatives only ran 3 candidates up there. But remember, with proportional representation, they would have had more reason to run more candidates and they would have gotten more votes. So they likely would have elected at least their leader, Trevor Bolin.
Wow, very interesting. But this begs the question. I mean, this, as I understand it, this province has had 3 referendums on electoral reform, and each one has failed, and I'd say, from my brief kind of overlook of it, for different reasons. But why do you think, and why does Fair Vote Canada think proportional representation has failed to kind of gain enough traction here in BC and just even countrywide? Is it that politicians are ignoring the clamoring for it, or are they just the ones who are for it doing a bad job of explaining it and how it's different and better in some ways than first past the post?
Yeah, I think that I just want to push back a little bit on the 3 referendums that have failed, because we did have one referendum in 2005 following a citizens' assembly process where it was approved by 58% of voters, and the government had set the threshold at 60%. So it didn't meet the threshold, but most of our MLAs are elected with far less than 58% of the vote. So they set a very high threshold for that one. But in answer to your question, I think the problem why we haven't seen proportional representation implemented already is because it's always been a problematic process. And we tend to go to referendums, which are a very blunt tool, which give voters a binary choice. So black or white, take it or leave it. And referendums are extremely vulnerable to manipulation by opponents, which, by the way, usually includes all those politicians that were elected under the old system. So anyway you slice it, politicians are in a total conflict of interest when it comes to changing voting systems. And that's why we advocate taking electoral reform out of the hands of politicians and putting it to a citizen-led process we can trust. And that's why we call for another citizens' assembly, because voters are going to trust a group of randomly selected citizens with no vested interest to make a fair choice in their own best interests, more than they'll ever trust something brought forward by politicians.
I think it's a really interesting point, especially since, and I remember this quote specifically, when they had a debate about proportional representation before the referendum a few years back, the current Premier, John Horgan, said, if you were woke, you would know that pro-rep was lit. So clearly he's at least saying he's in favor of it. Of course, without it, he would not have this huge majority right now. So you say you're in favor of a citizen-led sort of process. I mean, do you also think that if John Horgan was true to his word, he would just implement for a proportional representation, or does it require citizens to do it?
It's whether or not they can overcome that conflict of interest. And, John Horgan campaigned on a referendum, which to his credit, he did follow through on. We can argue about whether the referendum was biased one way or the other. Certainly the research shows that, as I said, there's always the bias toward the status quo. But the exit polls, even the ones right after the 2018 referendum, consistently show that voters want a system where the party's share of the vote matches its share of the seats. So if the NDP wins 45% of the votes, they should win 45% of the seats. That makes sense to most people. But voters also want to see parties cooperate for the public good. And we did see that happening to some degree under the previous NDP and Green arrangement. So those two things, where vote share is reflected in seat share and where parties cooperate to, in the public interest, are basically the two main principles behind proportional representation, pardon me. But during referendums, citizens are always bombarded with false messaging that is designed to incite fear, and it works. So it's not proportional representation that's the problem. It's no harder to mark your ballot choices 1, 2, 3. It gives voters more choice than just placing a single X. And voters in most of the developed world have switched over to proportional representation. We're one of the only 3 laggards. Canada, the US, and the UK are the only 3 developed countries still using what is basically a medieval system. So the problem isn't proportional representation, it's the process that we've been using to implement it. And if we put it in the hands of a citizens' assembly and we give our legislatures instructions to follow that recommendation, so that we don't have to go to a referendum again, which is so easily manipulated, I'm sure that we would see proportional representation implemented, because each and every citizens' assembly, and there have been, 13 of them or something across Canada in the last 20 years, each and every one of them, when they have a neutral body of people looking at the evidence and being able to ask questions so they understand it completely, they always recommend proportional representation.
One more question for you. Kind of going back to a federal level here. Again, I mean, this current prime minister, in his first mandate, I believe, I can't remember if it was during the election or after, but he said this would be the final election that would be fought under first past the post. Again, he changed his mind, and that was ended up being untrue. But do you think that this has to kind of be implemented somewhere on a provincial level first, before it becomes something that will actually happen on a federal level? Or do you think the feds, if they're, again, actually, if this prime minister was actually speaking truth about it, that he'd have to do it on that level before the provinces follow suit?
No, I don't think it matters which level. I think that we could easily have adopted proportional representation in British Columbia in 2005 if the threshold hadn't been so artificially high. But we've also seen on a national level it being implemented in New Zealand. They adopted proportional representation fairly recently, more recently than most other European countries who use it. I think it was 1996, about 25 years ago. So they actually had it in place for the last, I think, they have elections every 3 years there, but it was implemented nationwide there after a referendum process. And not because the parties were terribly proactive about doing it, but because each of them promised it a couple of elections in a row when they were finally shamed into doing it by the population. So it's not something that is easy to implement via a referendum, but I don't think there's any hard rules that it has to be done on one level first. I think you're absolutely right, though, when you talk about Trudeau. The question is, would he ever have made such a promise if he had any hopes of achieving a majority government? And in my opinion, the answer is no. He only promised it because he was hoping to win a minority government. And he was smart. He knows that a lot of Canadians really want to see this reform happen, and he took advantage of that. And it came out when all of the signs were pointing to proportional representation. His party did a pivot. They did an about face, and they came up with all kinds of reasons which were simply not factual as to why it shouldn't happen. So again, we're seeing that self-interest when we were this close. And he did make that campaign promise over, I can't remember, someone actually counted it, over 1,400 times during the campaign of the 2015 election, that this would be the last election under first past the post. And we saw it. It was going well. It was, everyone thought it would be adopted. That's the way that all of the hearings were going. And when they saw the writing on the wall, they decided, no, we're not going to do that after all. And here we are.
Yeah, here we are indeed. All right, this is definitely not an issue that's going away. We're going to be talking about a lot in the future. Gisela, I'm grateful that you came on the show and made some time for us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You're very welcome. That's Gisela Ruckert with Fair Vote Canada. We'll be right back on Moose Talks to talk to Dr. Jong Kim with Northern Health right after this.
The new Friends combo from Panago is the perfect pizza party for two. So whether it's your pal or partner, your mate or broski, a bubble buddy, BFF, comrade or compatriot, or even just a really hungry alter ego, the Friends combo was made to share with your closest at a distance amigos. Right now, get any large recipe pizza, chicken bites, and 2 pops for only $28. Order yours at panago.com.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the City of Fort St. John has increased garbage collection to weekly on your regular collection day. Recycling will continue as usual. Be aware pickup times may vary due to the extra pickups. Remember to keep your bins at least 3 feet apart and ensure the lids are closed. Learn more at fortstjohn.ca under Garbage and Recycling. Be a part is being in this together.
Support your favorite local shops and restaurants with the Moose Market at moosefm.ca and get it delivered right to your door. Do you need to update your wardrobe? Refresh your wardrobe today and save money. Get $50 to spend at Borealis Clothing here in Fort St. John for only $40. Shop local without leaving your own couch with the Moose Market at moosefm.ca.
In the oil field industry, things get dirty, and I mean real dirty. But at Soap City Cleaning, they'll take care of all your dirty problems. Soap City Cleaning provides industrial rags and wipes to oil field companies in the North Peace region, along with cleaning of coveralls, gloves, and any other oil field attire. They offer pickup and delivery on a regular basis, plus efficient turnaround times for even the busiest rigs around. There's nothing too big, too small, or too dirty for Soap City Cleaning. See them on 95th Ave or online at EnviroRags.ca.
Watch this show live on Facebook or download the podcast at Energeticcity.ca.
Welcome back to Moose Talks. I'm Dub Craig. We're joined now by Dr. Jong Kim, the Chief Medical Officer of Health with Northern Health. We're going to talk a bit about flu season and what that looks like this year. Thank you for being on Moose Talks, Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
You're very welcome. So why don't we start with how you think or how you're expecting the flu season to be different this year, if at all, in light of the pandemic that we're currently in?
Thank you very much. As you mentioned, we have a COVID-19, and it's really important that we take the influenza out of the picture. And unlike COVID-19, with the influenza, we got the vaccine. Mm-hmm. And also, the measures we take for the COVID-19 is also effective against influenza because both of them are kind of contagious respiratory illness that's spread by droplets. So if we can get this right, with a good vaccination for the flu and continued good practice that we people do for COVID-19, but also effective for the influenza, they keep the distance, stay home, if you're ill, good hand washing, good respiratory etiquette, we can actually really control both COVID-19 and influenza. Some of the southern hemisphere, the countries which have their winter and the flu season during our summer, like Australia and so on, they've shown that when they get this right, with a good kind of respiratory illness measures, mainly for the COVID-19, but with a good influenza vaccination, they flatten out the influenza curve.
So you're saying if we kind of do all the things we should be doing for COVID-19, keep that up, it might even be a lighter flu season than normal for the healthcare system.
With those measures and with those vaccinations, that might turn out to be a lighter flu season. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. Let's just kind of go through this quickly because it's changed a lot, I would say, since the start of the pandemic. It kind of looked like COVID-19 symptoms and flu symptoms were very similar. Can you tell the difference just from symptoms alone if you happen to be feeling ill? Can you tell if it's one or the other?
I would actually advise, when you have those respiratory illness and the fever and so on, take it as a kind of respiratory viral illness and try not to kind of distinguish between them.
Okay.
Because there are some different characteristics, but it's not appropriate to make a diagnosis just based on the symptoms for the COVID-19 and influenza.
All right. So, is your recommendation then, so stay home, obviously, if you're sick, treat the symptoms. Do you think we should be calling Northern Health and the health line and say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Should I go get a COVID-19 test just in case because the symptoms can be similar?
Yeah, and influenza is a serious illness too. You can get seriously ill and hospital and die from the influenza too. So if you have a significant respiratory symptoms, and also you have a respiratory symptoms that in the BC we have the self-assessments tool. We continue to recommend use the self-assessments tool, kind of assess kind of your symptom and kind of risk level, and provide a guidance either call kind of virtual clinic to get further assessment, arrange for testing, and sometimes if you have a high risk symptoms, recommend you to come to the emergency room.
Okay. If you're feeling that way, Dr. Kim, you're feeling like you might have some of those symptoms. For those who don't know or have forgotten, because it seems like we've had a 5-year year here, what's the best way to treat the symptoms if you're feeling ill from perhaps flu?
Sometimes you get the serious illness, you get the shortness of breath and start to have a chest pain and dizziness. That's the time to get the kind of physician assessments or nurse practitioner assessments or come to the emergency room for assessments. Otherwise, then it's treating is similar to any other kind of viral illness by taking a good rest, stay home, taking a good rest, and have your body kind of fight off that infection.
Okay. And again, kind of in the press release that Northern Health put out, you wanted to say, it's very important to get a flu shot every year, but this year even more so because you want to take influenza out of it, I think you said. Why is it so important because of that? Is it, again, as you say, in case we are unable to flatten the curve, we want to make sure that the health system can still deal with patients that may be coming in?
One part is that we do not want to have that kind of double pandemic of flu and COVID-19 for our people and community. Second part is that like influenza and COVID-19, they have a similar kind of pressure point. So people who need to get tested for the influenza, they pressing on similar kind of bottleneck area for our kind of testing kind of logistics.
I see.
People who need to be hospitalized and treated for the influenza, again, press on the same kind of areas at that hospital that's needed for the COVID-19. So ensuring that the flu is flattened, and the key part for the flu, like an additional measure, is the flu vaccination. So kind of flattening the flu curve, ensure that we have adequate capacity for flu, for COVID-19, and other kind of essential healthcare services.
All right. Back to the flu shot. Who can get it? Who should get it? Is there kind of we get it for these people first and then the rest of us now kind of afterward, or is it available to anybody who wants it?
One part is that during the flu season, we recommend everyone to get kind of vaccinated. But we do strongly recommend for those people who are at the high risk of getting the serious illness to really get vaccinated. That includes children, older people, pregnant women, people with medical conditions, or people who care for those people at the kind of higher risk, as well as the people in a long-term care facility or those kind of high-risk settings.
And you mentioned children. If you want to get your kids vaccinated, what age do you have to be? Can it be any age, or is there kind of a youngest can be this old?
That's a good question. I apologize. I cannot pull out the kind of age they get started vaccination right off top of my head.
Okay.
But the younger the young infant, they tend to be at the high risk. So we recommend a vaccination from early age.
Okay.
Many of the vaccinations are some of the youngest age. We might not have the vaccine approved, but there are vaccines available for kind of younger children too. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, Dr. Kim, I mean, we can get the shot now, as I understand it. So where can we get the influenza shot?
I think in Northern Health, it's the first week of November is where we launch our flu vaccination programs. And it will be the usual kind of places you go to, but one like your pharmacist, your health unit, your doctor's office. But one difference this year is that many of those places now is appointments only. So to plan out and kind of contact those places so you can get your vaccine scheduled.
All right, very good information, Dr. Kim. I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us about this today.
Thank you so much for the invitation and to kind of promote and discuss our flu vaccination.
Absolutely, Dr. Kim. That's Dr. Jong Kim, the Chief Medical Officer of Health at Northern Health. We'll be right back to wrap things up on Moose Talks right after this.
This year, M&M Food Market is celebrating 40 years of helping Canadians put delicious meals on the table. They offer the best easy-to-prepare, top-quality foods with personalized customer service. They also offer one of the best franchise packages out there for you. Ever wanted to help Fort St. Johners put delicious food on the table? Are you hungry for new opportunities? M&M Food Market has a franchise opportunity for you right here in Fort St. John. Email store337@mmfoodmarket.com or visit their location at the north end of the Totem Mall.
Ugh, this dishwasher literally only has one job, and look at all the dishes that don't come clean.
Oh, first you soak them, then soap, quick scrub, and then into the dishwasher.
In that case, this isn't the dishwasher. You're the dishwasher. We need a modern, efficient one that does its job. Let's go to City Furniture, where there's an extended warranty on appliances, just in case.
So, no more dish duty for me?
Well, maybe just the pots.
Buy it today and take it home today, plus financing to suit you. City Furniture in Dawson Creek and Fort St. John.
Hot, delicious, and only $6. Head to Quiznos for their toasty deal of the day where you can enjoy a 9-inch sub for just $6. It's a different sub each day, and since they're only $6, try them all. It doesn't get better tasting than Quiznos, beside Walmart.
Now, a Sports Boosters update.
Registration nights at the Taylor Curling Club for the 2021 season from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. For ladies, Wednesday, October 28th. Men's, Thursday, October 29th. Mixed, Friday, October 30th. Curling starts November 11th. For more details, visit their Facebook page.
Send us your sports info, sports@moosefm.ca, or by fax, 263-9749. Sports Boosters on Moose FM. Our community first. This is Moose Talks with Dub Craig on Moose FM.
Thanks again to Dr. Jong Kim and Gisela Ruckert for joining us today. As always, you can keep up to date on all our local health news by making sure you check out Energeticcity.ca and following us on Facebook. Now, Adam just mentioned this quickly, and Dr. Kim did as well. Because clinics are kind of all appointment only this year due to COVID-19, if you want a flu shot, you should best to kind of look up your pharmacy online or call ahead to find out what their policy is. Adam was saying one local pharmacy, you have to fill out something kind of ahead of time, and then you're given a window to come by to get your shot. So just plan ahead this year. You won't be able to just drop in and get a flu shot from what Dr. Kim said. Anyway, that's it for this week. Adam Rayburn is the studio producer. I'm Dub Craig. Be well.
Join us next Friday at 10 a.m. for another episode of Moose Talks, a weekly talk show about Fort St. John and the North Peace.